everybody, my name is Caroline and I like to read books, so let's talk about them. Today's video is going to be a book review of Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. This is book number 5 in the Throne of Glass series and I was so excited to read this book. I pre-ordered this at my local bookstore in the hardcover edition, but as you can see, I've ended up with the paperback, so before I get into the actual review part, I'm just gonna kind of rant about what went down on release day. It wasn't actually as dramatic as I'm making it out to be. Basically, since I pre-ordered it, when the store opened, they were meant to send me a text message at like 9 AM just saying, hey, pre-orders are here, come collect them. And it got to nearly 11 AM and I hadn't heard anything, which was really weird. So I called them and they said they didn't have any hardbacks. Their hardbacks hadn't been delivered and they might not have any until November. And they told me I could get the paperback, but I was like, no, I don't want your stupid paperback. So I called up a bunch of other bookstores in Sydney and nowhere had the hardcover editions. Like nowhere. For some reason, Sydney just did not get delivered hardcover editions, which is really weird. So I ended up going in and getting the paperback that doesn't match my set. And it was just annoying because I had the day off work and I wanted to spend it reading, but by the time I actually got my book and got home, it was like 1 PM. So yeah, that was my drama. Just going to quickly mention before we get into the review that this is not going to be a spoiler-free video. So if you have not read this book or even the ones before it in the series, then do not watch this video. Like I mentioned before though, I was so excited to read this book because I had no idea what was going to happen. I have a lot of difficulty predicting where the story is going to go because these books always manage to take me by surprise. In the end, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars because I love this series. It's one of my all-time favorites. This one especially was so entertaining and addictive, and there was great character development and new parts of the world that we got to explore, but there were a few things in it that I was kind of unhappy with. The first problem I had is that Chaol is not in this book. Like, why? Why would you do that? And I'm not just upset about this because he's my favorite character potentially in the whole series, or because I think him and Aelin belong together and have the most pure love in all existence. I'm really just upset about it because it does not make sense. You have this character who's been in it since book 1 and has always for the previous 4 books been really central to the main storyline, and suddenly you get to book 5 where things are starting to pick up in pace and it's setting it up for the final book and you're like, nah, we don't need to hear from Chaol anymore, and especially considering what happened to him at the end of Queen of Shadows where he gets paralyzed trying to kill the king that he has served for his whole life and we don't get to see him recover. It really doesn't make sense to me, and as annoyed as I am about it, I am going to admit that I didn't notice he wasn't in it until like page 300 when I was like, hang on a second. So it's annoying, but it didn't ruin the book for me. The other thing I wasn't really a fan of is only a small thing, and it's that they spend so long in this book looking for this like game-changing thing that'll help them win this war. And I liked that plot. I like the introduction of a game changer, but I don't like that the whole story became the search for this thing instead of the actual war that is taking place. Like, we didn't get that much information about, you know, this dark lord who's raising an army or anything. We just get them kind of in their group on the search for this thing, and I kind of wish we got more of the war and less of the search. Honestly though, those are really the only 2 negatives that I can come up with for this entire book. The Chaol thing I'm just bitter about, and the other thing didn't really bother me that much. I just thought it was worth mentioning. So let's talk about some of the positives now. As always with a Sarah J. Maas book, I think the real strength is the characters and the ways that they interact. I loved seeing them all react to their new reality. They're at war, Dorian is king, Aelin is queen, and suddenly magic is back in the world. And it was really interesting seeing how everyone dealt with it in their own ways. Some characters kind of retreat into themselves a bit more, become a little quieter. Others kind of use humor as a coping mechanism. And even through all this, they still have really great relationships together. And I love reading about the ways that they interact because they joke and they argue and they feel like real people, and I just think it's such an amazing thing to read. And honestly, I love all the characters in this book. I loved the new characters that we got in this book, and I loved new information that we got about some old characters, and I just found it really great, and I love the characters so much. Another thing that I really loved in this book was the writing itself. I think the descriptions were really well done and beautiful, especially when it came to magic use and the scenery. I think with the magic use, it was really awesome reading about how the magic kind of becomes a part of the person using it, and it like flows through them, and the amount of magic they have inside them is like a well. I really thought it was well done. I will say though that I'm not a fan of how descriptive Sarah is with her sex scenes. I think they're a little too wordy, but that's just my personal preference. This book probably had my favorite ending out of any of the books in the series. It was so amazing. It took me completely by surprise and I absolutely loved it. Aelin and her sneaky plots just get me every time. I do kind of hate that as a main character, she keeps secrets from the reader kind of to build it up to that dramatic reveal, but the ending of this book totally made me okay with that, because that moment when she gets taken away but then all of a sudden their army arrives and now all they have to do is rescue Aelin and everything will be okay. Like, that was an amazing ending. I was so into it. I loved it, and now I can't wait for the next book. I kind of can't believe that I have to, but it was just such a great ending to a book and I loved it, and I recommend this book. If you haven't read it, you should read it and the rest of the series because it's great. Anyway guys, that's the end of this review video. I could go on for ages talking about like particular plot points and paragraphs that I really loved, but I don't need to do that. All you guys need to know is that I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was amazing, especially the ending, and I'll probably reread it at some point in the next year or however long before book 6 comes out. But yeah, I upload videos Wednesdays and Saturdays, so be sure to like and subscribe and tune in on those days for more bookish goodness. Toodaloo!